If you're in high school now, as our confirmation candidates are, or if it's been many decades since you've had that experience, I bet we all can recall a teacher or two that never had to raise his or her voice, but had complete control of the classroom. You almost knew instinctively which teachers you could go after and which you couldn't. We're still reading from the first chapter of Mark. And because Mark does not tell us about the story of the birth of Christ, the nativity narrative, he needs to identify who this person is. In Matthew and Luke, we hear about the shepherds and the wise men and the miraculous birth of the Christ child. So we know from the beginning something more about his identity. So Mark begins to introduce Jesus as going about preaching. And what he says in this section, he spoke with authority. We may not say that the teacher spoke with authority, but that's what he or she did. There's something we can recognize in another. Here in Mark, Christ has authority or power over evil, and his fame was beginning to spread everywhere. As we hear this gospel, perhaps we can be aware of the unclean spirits that are within each of us, those habits and choices we make which inhibit our growth as human beings and certainly as disciples of the Lord. The spirit we could be talking about is a spirit of selfishness, when I think that all things and all people must bind to my wishes. Or maybe the unclean spirit within me could be a pleasure principle that says all things are to be judged by how it makes me feel good. Our unclean spirit could be an unwillingness to forgive or to let go of grudges that create ongoing hostilities within families and among friends. What we need to do is believe that Jesus has authority over these spirits. We can change. We can live differently. What we need to do is admit our weakness, our unclean spirits, and ask for the grace to overcome them. It's a lifelong struggle, not one that we can win in a day, but win we can and win we must. Jesus has authority over all, but he claims authority over our lives only when we surrender to him, recognizing that without him, we are powerless over many things. We also know Mark goes on to tell us the rest of the story when we hear about Jesus' authority apparently being overcome and on the cross itself. But we go beyond that to talk about the victory of the resurrection. We really do fool ourselves if we think that we are in charge. It's God who's in charge, and that's what Mark proclaims today.